Hello everybody and welcome to my video about Cuba. My name is Helena and I am a 30-year-old Kiwi who travelled there from America with my parents. It was a journey and I'm very excited to tell you all about it. So the trip was amazing and we really enjoyed Cuba, but there were definitely some things to consider that we had not done enough research on and that we really should have known before we went. So the number one thing for a New Zealander going into Cuba is to really consider all of the visas and the requirements and the political situation in Cuba at the time. If you go from America into Cuba and you plan to return again, that will not be possible with a standard ESTA visa, which is how New Zealanders and Australians usually enter America. So for my family and I, we did a lot of research on how to get into Cuba, not so much research on how to get back out of it, and so we didn't realize this before we went. Upon landing in Cuba, we went and had a great holiday and loved it. When we went to leave, we were not able to because this ESTA had been removed. We instead flew out to Mexico, and I have now gone through the process of getting a visa to enter America because I come and go a lot. It only costs about $200. The form is relatively easy and takes about an hour to fill out. However, the appointment times, which you need to do the interview in order to get the visa, have very long wait times of hundreds of days. So some information on how we got to Cuba in the first place. So number one, we flew from Washington, where we were visiting, to Miami and then took a flight from Miami to Cuba. It wasn't possible to book a return flight, Miami, Cuba, Cuba, Miami, so we booked that on two separate legs. When we arrived into Miami, we went through security and went to the gate, and they have a lady there that sells the visa. Very straightforward, it takes a couple of minutes, it was about $100, and she was at the gate an hour and a half before, and when we returned to board the plane, she was already gone. So you do have a window of, it would seem, about an hour and a half, and you should get there earlier rather than later, but the process itself was very straightforward, and we were about the only people on the plane that were requiring that visa. Once we arrived in Cuba, we went out and got a taxi. We gave the phone number of our Airbnb host to the taxi driver, and he rang him to find out exactly where we needed to be and to tell the host when we would be there so he could meet us. On the topic of Airbnb, it's really important that you check the references here and make sure that they've got their 5 stars and that people have said that they helped them out a lot. When you arrive in Havana, you do have to have somebody who's a local that can help you out, to give you money, to give you recommendations, to make sure that you don't get scammed essentially. So the host that we had, he came and met us. He really was like a personal assistant. So not only did he exchange the money, but he organised a ride in a vintage car, which was $40 US an hour. We did 2 hours. He organised a taxi to take us to Vinales, which cost $200 for the day, and then he organised a driver to take us to Playa Larga and to bring us back again, which is about $230 in each direction. Some of the tourists that we met had got rental cars instead of being taken in taxis. The only thing about this was that they were caught out because of fuel shortages, so they were allowed to only get 10 litres a day if they went early in the morning, and a lot of the tourists were very concerned about how they were going to get enough fuel to get back to where they needed to go. Things to bring to Cuba. So it's true that Cuba does not import or export a lot of food products, and so therefore they have meat and they have rice and they have vegetables. They don't have a lot of snack food. So we bought dried fruit, crisps, candy, chocolate, and that was really good. I would definitely recommend that because the small stores that they do have very limited options. I would also suggest that you bring medicine for yourself and for other people there. Their pharmacies are empty, they don't have access to very good healthcare, and so everything that you could possibly need, you need to bring with you. Paracetamol, ibuprofen, anti-diarrhea, anti-nausea. The people there will happily take it off your hands after. It's better to have it than to not. And this includes bug spray. Particularly in Playa Larga, there is a lot of mosquitoes, and so we had brought room spray as well as body spray for the bugs, and then creams in case they got infected. In order to support the Cuban people, which is actually something that is required if you're American going on holiday, but not if you're from another country. However, it's still nice to do so, and so I bought a lot of clothes and shoes that were still in good condition that I otherwise might have donated to charity or sold on, and gave it out to the people, and it really did bring tears to their eyes. Now it's time to talk about the trip itself. So we had 2 days in Havana, 1 day in Vinales, 3 days in Playa Larga, and then 1 day back in Havana at the end. This was the perfect amount of time. I wouldn't personally need to stay any longer there. However, there were other tourists that were there for 3 weeks. From the ones I talked to, they were kind of questioning why they were doing it for so long, and so I think just getting a taste of it for the week was perfect. We had the right amount of time in Havana to see everything we wanted to see, and to do the vintage car trip, which we did for 2 hours. We did a day trip to Vinales, which was again plenty. and then relaxing for 3 days in Playa Larga was perfect. This is not where tourists usually go when they come from Western countries. Playa Larga is where the locals go on holiday, and we absolutely loved it. There was barely anybody around, hardly any tourists, and while the water wasn't as clear as you imagine from Cuba, it was clean and very warm and absolutely perfect. We had an amazing time. We then headed back to Havana and went to take our flight, which is when we realized that we could not leave. This was a little bit complicated. Credit cards do not work in Cuba. Not only can you not use them there, but you can't do any online booking. So this includes Expedia and flights, booking.com, all of the sites you would normally use. The only way to get out was to get friends from overseas to book our flights so that we could leave, and we were not the only people in this situation. So overall, our week in Cuba was absolutely incredible. We had an amazing time, and I would definitely recommend it if you want to see something different. The main thing to note as a New Zealander is that you can go there, and it's very easy to do so. You just cannot do it from America. It's really important that you enter from Canada, from Mexico, from somewhere else, and then you exit back out before going back to the States. So on that note, that is everything I had to share with you about Cuba. I hope that you enjoy your trip and you found this video informative, and I look forward to hearing about everybody's adventures.